In the centre of the Indian flag is an image which symbolises above all others its independence from British rule. It's a spinning wheel, and it represents Gandhi's Swadeshi movement, which encouraged the Indian people not to finance their own repression by buying British cloth, but instead to spin their own. This huge, politically motivated DIY movement had a devastating effect on a major British industry at the time, and was a powerful tool in India's struggle for independence. But DIY as political movement rather than home improvement has largely been forgotten in modern industrialised countries, where people have very little time or necessity to develop practical skills outside their very specific areas of specialisation. This has ultimately disempowered us. What political pressure can we really put on major energy companies or banks, for example, when we are so heavily dependent on them for our daily needs?
I'm quite cynical about how much we can change. I mean, yeah, sure we can vote, but it's all they're just the same.
The environmental gloom and doom stories do make me worry and make me feel quite guilty and kind of that I can't do anything either. It's all too big for me to do.
I did street demonstrations in my youth, a lot of street demonstrations. Did we change anything? No, we didn't stop the war in Vietnam.
But now a modern renaissance of Gandhi's Swadeshi movement is taking place. And this is a film about the people at the forefront of that movement. In our first film, we spoke to DIYers who have developed ways to run their cars and homes without being so dependent on major energy companies. But what about the financial system on which we depend? You can't just opt out of the economy if you should happen to object to the behaviour of the banks. Well, yes you can actually. All across the country, people are creating their own alternative economies. 3 years ago, a group in Totnes, Devon began a local currency called the Totnes Pound that could be used as an alternative to sterling.
We accept Totnes pounds, yes.
Oh, we accept the Totnes pound.
This is Ben Branwyn, co-founder of the Transition Network, which set up the initiative.
We printed 10,000 Totnes pounds and we paid the printer for printing them in Totnes pounds. It was about 800 quid. And we sold it into circulation. So we sold it at a discount as well to encourage people to buy the Totnes pounds and use them.
The Totnes pound is not legal tender and there are those who doubt its value, but how much confidence do people actually have in the value of sterling?
I think people give too much value to this piece of paper.
Yeah, not a lot, unfortunately. I think it used to be. When I was 15 years ago, maybe it was worth a lot more to me than it is now.
Quite clearly, people are questioning the financial system.
And Transition have a plan to harness the productive capabilities of communities of DIYers to imbue their currency with a worth that they say sterling does not have.
The Energy Group has set up a community-owned renewable energy company called Tresok. Once the Totnes Energy Company starts producing energy, it could actually start producing a local currency. And on that currency, it could have written on it, instead of "I promise to pay the bearer the sum of 1 Totnes pound," it says, "I promise to pay the bearer a kilowatt hour of electricity." That means you have a currency that's backed by something that's incredibly valuable. If we go into hyperinflation and the pounds in your bank or under your mattress start losing value very, very significantly, then something that's backed by energy, where the price will probably be going up during this time, will be very resilient.
Somebody who has made the dangers of hyperinflation and other catastrophic events his speciality is Vinay Gupta, a risk management consultant who advises everyone from engineering companies to the Department of Defence on potential disaster scenarios and how to deal with them.
The biggest threats are the natural disasters. That's earthquakes and it's floods. Those disasters are big threats in the developing world. They're not especially large threats in the West. Our big threats are actually economic. If we go through another depression in the sort of 1929 style, as seems to be a substantial risk, then where we go from there is that a lot of cities are just going to become economically uninhabitable. And you can see this happening in America with Detroit and New Orleans, where New Orleans was the double whammy of depressed economy and natural disaster, and it's something like half of the population it had before the crisis. Detroit, they're farming with horses downtown. That's the real threat to developed world cities. In a real disaster, it's the loss of the systems that currently keep you alive that really does the killing.
Vinay is the inventor of something called the Hexayurt, which is essentially his response to a lack of faith in the government's preparedness for disaster scenarios.
The Hexayurt project is an approach to trying to distribute the ability for people to build emergency shelter. So the idea was to take what you have and turn it into what you need. And in any industrial city or in any big city in the developing world, you have access to plywood. So the walls are a single 4x8 sheet of plywood just placed on its side, and you just screw the wall pieces together, that's your wall. It's almost instant. And then to get the roof, you take 6 more sheets of plywood and you cut them on the diagonal, then you turn those pieces around and it makes this L-shaped triangle, and then you put 6 of those together to form the roof. It's incredibly simple and incredibly easy. And the idea is that once you've helped do that a couple of times, you're now a master builder of hexyurts. You train the locals do the labour.
Vinny's design sparked widespread interest from governments and relief agencies, but instead of patenting the idea, Vinny published the plans openly on the internet for anyone to use.
We gave away the designs with no copyright and no patent so that anybody could use it for any purpose at any time. And they've built hexyurts in the garden in the middle of the Pentagon 3 times. There's a courtyard in the centre of the building where they build them as part of the StarTides programme, which is an open source disaster relief effort which is running out of National Defence University focused on infrastructure.
Open source culture is at the heart of this DIY movement, and someone whose ideas have been central to that is Richard Stallman, a world-renowned computer programmer and the founder of the free software movement.
Everyone that uses computers deserves free software. If you're forbidden to run the program as you wish, obviously you don't have control. If you can't study and change the plans, you don't have control. The developer then decides what you can do and decides what you can't do through the code of the program. And often they put in malicious features. For instance, there are features to spy on the user, features to deliberately restrict users, and even backdoors to attack users. And one program you may have heard of that has all 3 of kinds of malicious features is called Microsoft Windows. Malware features are known in Windows and in Mac OS, and it's not even a scandal because the users feel so helpless they don't even get upset anymore. My idea for what to do about this was, since I was an operating system developer by profession, I would write another operating system, and then, being the author, I could legally make it free. Free software means that the user has the 4 essential freedoms. Freedom 0 is the freedom to run the program as you wish. Freedom 1 is the freedom to study the source code, the plans of the program, and then change it so that the program does what you wish. Freedom 2 is the freedom to help your neighbor, which is the freedom to redistribute exact copies when you wish. And freedom 3 is the freedom to contribute to your community. That's the freedom to distribute copies of your modified versions of the program when you wish. So, I designed a license that would make sure that every user of every copy of every version of my programs would have the 4 freedoms. And I did this by using copyright law in a special way. That way is called copyleft. It says, you're free to distribute exact copies and distribute your modified versions, but when you do, you must distribute the entirety of whatever containing program this is under the same license, giving the next person the same freedoms that you got from me. The license I wrote is called the GNU General Public License. The business may put a lot of work into making a version that's more convenient, attractive, as bait for people to fall into the trap of giving up their freedom. If we're going to defend freedom, if we're going to establish freedom in a lasting way, we have to resist that. And the GNU General Public License is what I designed to legally resist it.
But its uses are not limited to software. All over the internet, open source communities take advantage of the GNU General Public License and copyleft to distribute information and media freely. Vinay, who published the plans to his hexyurt on the internet under Rich's GNU General Public License, argues that this open source approach can be applied more generally to political empowerment and poverty alleviation.
Local technical self-reliance and local economic self-reliance are the twin foundations on which freedom is built. Gandhi's Swadeshi movement assumed that if you could make people economically independent, they would gain their political independence. And in the 21st century, that means economic and technical independence. Free software is technical independence for the 21st century. People have the ability to take the software that runs their computers and make it do what they want it to do rather than being chained to the company that wrote the software. In the same way, the ability to build a toilet and to purify your own water and to grow your own food is the ability to continue to live well regardless of what's happening in your country at a political level. And all of those are things that you can learn how to build from the internet. And we're within 10 years of almost the entire human race having access to the internet by cell phone. If they're having a problem in the city, if the presidential palace is burned down, but you can still grow your own food and purify your own water, in some real sense, you're free.
In the future, will people adopt a more distributed response to the issues of the day? We'd like to argue that the DIY Britain that the Tories have put at the heart of their election manifesto is already here, and its fuel is the failure of the political and business elites rather than the big society rhetoric of David Cameron.
Due to the fact that the left and right have come together, there's a lot of the youth that feel disaffected by a lot of the mainstream parties and disaffected by what they actually offer.
They're all doing the same thing right now, no one's doing anything new.
At the moment I don't feel inspired by any of the political parties and not by any political movements as such.
I think it would be beneficial if you had a health minister who had worked in the health sector, or an education minister who had been a teacher or something, who knows at grassroots levels what the problems are.
Perhaps the next political movement waiting to happen is a practical rather than an ideological one. One thing's for certain, DIY is way more fun than standing on a picket line or chaining yourself to a railing.